Welcome, and thank you very much for coming to this press conference. We really appreciate it, and you'll hear about the Promise projects. And also I'd like to welcome at this stage some VIPs that are here. Lois Brown, who's, stand up Lois, she's running for the Conservatives on the next election. And you're running for Newmarket Aurora. And Theo Anthony, where are you, Theo? Stand up, running for Markham Ontario as a Conservative member. Thanks for coming, and thank you to the members of the media that are here this afternoon. Without further ado, I'd like to recognise David Stell. Where's David around? At the back there. My counterpart in crime and has helped to put this afternoon on. Thanks very much, David. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the Chief Executive Officer of Christian Children's Fund, Patrick Kanakasingham. Please welcome Patrick.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let me begin by congratulating Lindsay for pronouncing my last name. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but Theodore Anthony, who was just introduced, is of Sri Lankan heritage, but his last name is Anthony, and that much easier to pronounce as opposed to mine. I just want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you. Can I kindly ask you, by show of hands, if this is your very first visit to the CCFC premises? That's many of you, so thank you so much for coming. This is a very important occasion for us. I just want to echo what Lindsay said earlier. I just want to acknowledge Louis Brown has been a dear friend to CCFC. So thank you, Louis, for taking time off your, it's your personal time. So thank you, really appreciate it. Also, I want to thank my colleagues here at CCFC. The team here has put in a tremendous effort to make sure that we work in partnership with both ADRA and Emmanuel International to put this event together. So I want to thank my colleagues as well. But let me also take this opportunity to welcome colleagues from Emmanuel International and ADRA. Very special thank you to Philip Crawley for coming, Matthew from ADRA, as well as Richard from Emmanuel International. My colleague here, Philip Tanner, is actually going to talk about Promise. So I don't want to steal the thunder away from Philip, because Philip has been quite intimate as far as the project itself is concerned, but also has the institutional knowledge in terms of how it's evolved. But friends and colleagues, this is what I want to do. I want to just take 2 minutes to talk a little bit about why this is important for CCFC. I don't know if you know this. CCFC has been doing child-centered international development work for almost 60 years. And whenever I say this, both here in Canada, whenever I travel and talk about this, people look at me and say, oh, really? We didn't know that. And there's a sense of modesty in terms of us not really going about talking about the work that we do. But beyond that, we really feel it's important for us to highlight some of the salient points regarding the impact that we're beginning to have. We are just in the process of actually rolling out our new strategy as of April 1, a 3-year strategy. And one of the things, colleagues, that we've decided to do is to look at systemic issues, just like maternal and newborn child health, that impede children from realizing their full potential. And it's quite compelling. We have a laser-like focus looking at health, looking at education, but also it's as important for us to focus on issues, cross-cutting issues that impede or constrain children from pursuing their dreams. Child protection being one, child participation being another one, and something else that we've all acknowledged, we all talk about, is about gender inequality as well. So what we're going to talk about today is just not compelling as far as Promise is concerned, but it's important for CCFC because it's an integral part of who we are and what we plan to pursue moving forward. My colleagues here obviously would share their thoughts as well as far as the project and the program is concerned. But I just want to say, a real effort has gone in just not highlighting the impact that Promise is beginning to have. And it's my understanding that we're going to be showing a trailer later on depicting it as well. But I really want us to just not to be engaged, but to ask the right questions in terms of how we could build on promise and as to what the next level of success for us would look like. So once again, thank you so much for coming to our premises. Thank you so much for partnering with us. And I would say the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Philip Crawley, the publisher and CEO of the Globe and Mail. He's also the Honorary Consul General of New Zealand, where I come from originally. So, and from, could be bad actually, but, and also a supporter of the Newcastle soccer team in England. And England rugby, so he does a lot of things, Philip, and I've known him for a long time, but most important that he does a lot of work with charity, and Globe and Mail have got on board with the Promise Project and provided adverts and will continue for the Promise program and promote the video that you'll see the trailer later on. So I'm really grateful to you, Philip, and thank you very much on behalf of the Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Philip Crawley.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. This is a very interesting project you've got going, and I want to talk a little bit about how the Globe and Mail has got involved and how it's helping to support what I think your project's called Promise. You're delivering on the promise, and I want to thank Lindsay and the people here for helping to educate me about what you've been doing in different parts of the world. The Globe, like a lot of media, gets a lot of criticism, particularly in the last few years. There's been probably more hostile views of the media and its doings than there has been before, particularly because of a president who sits in the White House at the moment, who's popularized the phrase fake news, and yet he's the perpetrator of a lot of it himself. But the fact is, there's a less high opinion of media in many places than there used to be. And yet, in many parts of the world, the media is trying to tell the truth, and sometimes the consequences are quite bad for the people. We've got a woman coming to Toronto, I hope, in June, if she's not been arrested by the Philippine government. She gets arrested pretty much every time she goes back to the Philippines, and then let her out again. So we want to bring her to speak in Toronto in June and talk about press freedom. Early May in Ottawa is Press Freedom Day, and we're the sponsors of that. So we feel that it's important to keep reminding people just what it takes sometimes in parts of the world where it is actually very dangerous to be a journalist. In some parts of the world, journalists are killed off on a routine basis. There's about 1,000 journalists been killed in the last 10 years. So it's not like that in Canada. Canada is a country that respects the media by and large. But we still feel that the national newspaper has a role to give back. So that's, as CEO, what I try and do is, if a charity needs some help and they sometimes can't afford to pay, we help out. Some of the charities are very large. They can afford to do things in style. We've worked for years, for instance, with the United Way. Their budgets are enormous. We work with Me to We. Their budgets are very large, and they're very effective in many parts of the world. But a lot of smaller charities do actually need some oxygen, and sometimes that's what we do to help them. I think it's a demonstration to our readership, to our audience, that sometimes we can give back and do good, not harm, and the Globe and Mail readership appreciate that. We've written a lot recently about speaking truth to power, if you like, as a story that started to run on February the 7th, the Wilson-Raybould story. And that doesn't always get you top of the pops with people in Ottawa. But I think it's a reminder to people in Canada that independent media that's not attached to one party or another has a valuable place in our democratic society. Covering what's going on in places like Africa is very important to what the Global Mail does. We're the only media organization now in the country that has a large team of foreign correspondents. We've got people in Africa, in Asia, in North America, in Mexico, 3 in Europe, scattered around the world doing the stories we think matter most to Canadians. We've had our most experienced foreign correspondent is Jeffrey York. He's based in Johannesburg. He travels all over Africa. And unfortunately, a lot of what he covers is conflict. What he covers is war and bad things happening. It's great that you've got a story to tell on things that you are achieving and making a real difference in countries that really need that help. So the kind of work that you're doing with the Promise Project is not only very important to those countries that are the beneficiaries of this, but also it's a demonstration to Canadians that the money that's getting spent, the donations that they're giving, the money that's coming from federal government to support this is being well used. And I think when you see the video, I've seen some of the rough cuts of it, I think it tells the story very powerfully. It really does show the difference that you can make. We've been running ads in the paper the last few days for the flood relief in Malawi that one of the 3 organizations that represented it has got their name on, Emmanuel. And hopefully that's helping to raise some funds for you. But I hope that the message that you're putting out today and the video that you've created will really help to get a bigger audience, because it's a story that deserves to be heard. So thank you to everybody here for helping to get this done, and I wish you success as this project continues, because you've obviously got a track record now, you've got achievement, you've got things to show, and that is very important when you go back to Ottawa to ask for money, as I'm sure you'll be doing. So let me pass on now to Phil Tanner, who's our Senior Director, Policy and Government Relations here, one of our hosts today, and he will tell you more about the Promise Project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowley, and good afternoon to everyone. It's really has been a privilege for me to be part of the co-creation of the Promise Project, and to give me a few minutes to actually tell the story, as you said, of how the project came about and what it does. I think globally, many of you know that about 216 mothers out of every 100,000 births dies. The number is staggering. In sub-Saharan Africa, you can say the number exceeds 500. And if you zero in on a few West African countries where we work, you'll say it exceeds 1,000, 1,200, and 1,500. It's staggering. Maybe what a lot of people don't know is that for every woman we talk about that dies at birth, 30 women and girls die or suffer from infection, injuries, disability, and marginalization in their communities that are resulting from birth complications. And especially that's true of girls who are forced into early marriages. The good news is global rates in maternal health have been improving, and I think since the 90s it may have reduced by about 40% or more. But you can imagine the numbers are still unacceptable. And it might surprise you further to think that building a brand new state-of-the-art clinic in a rural community in Africa may not be the silver bullet to solve the crisis. There are major challenges, both in demand side and in the supply side of decent healthcare services, and it's something that this project addresses. Traditional norms in communities, like unsafe home deliveries, untrained and unsanitary traditional workers, healers and midwives, poor transportation and road networks, a lack of knowledge around the complications that arise at birth, and sometimes just bad experiences at clinics. We talk about clinics being just mother and baby unfriendly, because mothers and children have really bad experiences going to some of these clinics. So the Government of Canada launched the Muskoka Initiative on Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, and it was the 36th G8 meeting in Toronto. It was held here in 2010. And a number of NGOs were very much involved in shaping the agenda of that G8. And I'd like to say that our agencies were amongst those. Christian Children's Fund of Canada, Emmanuel International Canada, and ADRA Canada, we realized that doing small activities like midwife training, training women in villages, motorcycle ambulances to get them to clinics, simple nutrition programs, gender focus, basic education and awareness were very little investments in simple solutions, but they could change communities and they could save lives. And this was the premise of the Promise Project. But doing it successfully, we realized, required a wide range of partners: international NGOs, local NGOs, private sector, academia, and even the media. And this belief was strengthened in 2014 when the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he launched a real call for action. And he made a statement, and he said, "No woman should die while giving birth or giving life." Now, I just want that to sink in for just a moment. I want everyone here to personalize that for a moment. No woman should die while giving life. It's an incredibly profound statement. And I'd like to say that this was the guiding force behind our project when we got started. Our consortium, with our local partners, came together to address what we felt was a humanitarian imperative for a situation that was fundamentally unjust, but within our capacity to change. And we agreed it would be done better together. That was our premise. And why? Because we would be sharing technical expertise, resources, we would strengthen our coordination here in Canada and abroad, we would share our learnings and our findings, we'd be working together to access government ministries, and it was a multiplier effect for the communities that we served. And this project, just to summarize, which has reached now 300,000 direct and indirect beneficiaries in 3 countries of Malawi, Rwanda, and in Ghana. And it's been working with mothers, pregnant women, newborn, and children under 5, and it has 3 basic pillars. And remember, healthcare is about supply and demand. So we talk first about supply, and it's the delivery of essential health services. And some examples are training, education, equipped clinics, sanitation facilities, gender-sensitive practices and services. And on the demand side, we talked about improved utilization of essential healthcare services. We work with model mothers, emulating best practices for other mothers, community health workers who are trained. One that we often miss, fathers sensitized, can you imagine? Moms and dads getting prepared for delivery together. It's something that often doesn't happen as often as we think. Family planning education and referral systems, something that we take for granted here in Canada. And the last pillar is to increase the consumption of nutritious foods, and that includes supplements and the all-important micronutrients as well. And these include activities around kitchen gardens at schools, fruit tree planting, livestock programs, education materials. We focus on the first 1,000 days of a child's birth, and of course the all-important child growth monitoring. Well, in conclusion, our belief is that the recipients of aid in this project should also be active participants. So when we talk about justice for all, we must strive for the transformation of children and youth, especially women and girls, from being victims to being agents of change in their communities, in their families, and in their nation as well. So Promise, and I think many projects like it doing maternal health, whether they're funded by the Government of Canada like this one, whether it's funded from the generosity of so many Canadians across this great country of ours, this project is doing just that, and it is fulfilling on that promise. It's been a privilege for me to be a co-creator of this, to be associated with it, and I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to tell you a little bit about it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask to speak to us Steve Matthews, who's Executive Director of ADRA, who will fill us in on what's happening in Rwanda.
So at ADRA Canada, we have a purpose. Our purpose is to serve humanity so all may live as God intended. When we look at being able to be part of this coalition, it helps us to be able to fulfill that purpose. When we were able to come together as a group, we were able to pool our strengths and execute a project. It helped us to obtain the funding we needed to be able to go forward with this project. And we also hope that we can do this again in the future, probably with maybe with the Promise 2 project.
Noted.
Absolutely. In Rwanda, we have a few unique things that we're actually implementing there. Phil had mentioned about nutrition, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the nutrition side of what we're doing, how our project is helping to improve nutrition levels for people living in and participating in the projects that we are involved with. We're using a couple of techniques. We're using permaculture, so basically taking and using nature's benefits to teaching the people how to just use the natural environment to grow things without the use of pesticides, to be able to increase their crops. But we're also using intercropping. So taking, for example, a cover crop, which will reduce the amount of evaporation from the land, so they don't need as much water. In the area that we're working, they will receive most of their water in a short period of time. So unlike Canada, where we go through a winter season where we're not going to grow anything outside, they have the temperatures to grow. But if they can't access the water, then it's the same as trying to grow here in winter. So we teach people how to use techniques to be able to grow crops year-round. We also use the kitchen garden. The kitchen gardens were mentioned by Phil. But what that does is it provides a convenient source of food where rather than the mother, who typically is the one that has to go gather the crops, the mother having to walk a couple kilometers to a garden to be able to try to harvest food, and that being sporadic, they can actually go outside and access food year-round. And good, nutritious food. We teach them how to grow things such as beets, onions, beans, corn, and also being able to put those plants together to form natural insect repellents, so that onions will keep away, for example, insects that will attack the beets. Another area that we're focusing on is trying to change mentalities. It was talked about earlier about involving husbands, involving men. So the Canadian government has their FIAP, and part of that is looking at gender with all of our programming. When a lot of people hear about the feminist side of things, they think, okay, automatically we're just working on women and girls. Our project actually incorporates other aspects of that side. So I'm going to tell you a story about an individual named Alfred. So Alfred is a self-professed drunkard. He would come home drunk in the evening after spending whatever means that the family had. He'd beat his wife. His wife was pregnant. His wife feared for the life of not just herself, but for their child. What option did she have left but to flee? She left and went to stay with her family. So now we have Alfred's situation has gotten even worse. He's lost his wife, who he loved, but wasn't exactly the greatest husband. So we call him now a champion husband, because what happened to him is that ADRA had a men's group. ADRA's men's group spoke to Alfred. They came to him and said, listen, you need to change your ways. You have a role in your family. You have a child coming. And by working with him, they actually taught him how to, they got him away from alcohol. He changed his life. He was able to start earning an income. His wife came back to him, and she says now he's a completely changed man because of what's been done there. But not only is he a changed man from the way that he treats her, but he also now helps out around the home. So whether it's helping to collect water or to help with the growing of vegetables, taking care of the children, just changing that mentality of, men's role can actually be more helping rather than just leaving it to the woman to have to do everything. So that's one case of someone who's been changed by our project and the work that we do. Our motto is justice, compassion, and love. And we feel that through executing projects like this, we're able to just change how people interact with each other and to improve the conditions of families.
So now we go to Richard McGowan, Executive Director of Emmanuel International, who's going to tell us a bit about the documentary and the video that we're going to see something of just in a few minutes. So let me hand over to Richard. Thank you.
I'm also going to share about how our three organizations came together. So how did we come together? All started when I was about 13. I had a tryout for a team called Crystal Palace. I thought, there's a soccer team in England, in London. I thought I was good enough. They didn't. I went back last year. They still didn't want me. So what's exciting, though, is that Crystal Palace is playing Newcastle this weekend. And I think we will win. But by not becoming a soccer player, I got married to my wife, Pam, who is here, as teenagers, and we came to Canada. And one thing led to another, and I joined Emmanuel International in 1981. I lasted 2 years. I couldn't take it anymore. I retired in my mid-50s, and they came back and asked if could I help. And I said, yes, I will do it for 1 year. That was 11 years ago. And I still love it. I absolutely love it. I'm excited that we have a number of people from Emmanuel. Just show your hands if you're here from Emmanuel. We have 2 board members, our chairperson, Rob Fish, and Sonia, and a number of our supporters are here and employees. And I know that Phil and Patrick were chair people of an organisation called CCRDA, the Canadian Christian Relief and Development Association. And I was a chairperson about 2-3 years ago, and we have Joella here, who is part of CCRDA. And it was because of CCRDA that we actually, Phil and I, became friends. And we did different things, and when we were on the board together, we had a meeting. And in that meeting, Phil and I said, wouldn't it be great if some of our organizations could come and put a proposal together and send it to the Canadian government? So I was in Ottawa. Paul and Helen, who are country directors from Malawi, and they were there for about 31 years. Now they are the international directors for EI around the world. They were there. And at the end of the meeting, they put the call out. And I looked at Phil, he looked at me, he says, you in? And I go, oh yes, we are in. And that's how it started. Phil then went and asked a few other organizations to be part of this promise. And we ended up with the 3 organizations. And I have to be honest, I absolutely love this promise. It's been amazing, some of the stories that we have heard. Christy, who is our project coordinator, was telling us about an email she received from one of the health workers. In his training, he was taught certain procedures that he was able to learn. The next day, he says to Christy, I was able to save up the mother and the child because of what you taught us. Isn't that exciting? And that is one of many. I'm sure that you guys could say the same. So we put this promise together, and it has been great. What's really neat, a promise worth keeping. We had a young lady in our office on one of the summer student programs that comes out, and she was doing journalism, and she was starting to write an article, and she actually came up with a promise worth keeping, and we have decided to use that between all 3 of us, and it's been used in many different areas. We are also very excited today to have Perry Mark with us. Perry and I travelled to Malawi, Rwanda and Ghana to do this documentary, and I was blown away with the work of all three countries. When I was in Rwanda, all your minds go back to the genocide, and it's stuff like that. It is a beautiful country. The country's scenery is perfect. The people are wonderful. Same in Ghana. We were treated royal, and we had the opportunity to spend about 3-4 days in each country shooting. And I am so excited today to show 4 or 5 minutes of this documentary that's going to be shown right across Canada. And this is the first showing. I've seen bits of it. I wanted to be here to see the whole 4 minutes or whatever that time thing is, and because I know Emmanuel part of this, and so is Christian Children Fund, and definitely ADRA's part of it. So I would like Lindsay. I'm not sure how we're doing this, Lindsay. We've got it all queued up. We've got all queued. So this is just 4 or 5 minutes of the Promise Worth Keeping documentary from our three countries. Thank you.
Great, thank you. No, Perry Mark for maybe too long, Perry. It's a long time. And the documentary will be finished and edited, and then we'll be putting it out in the marketplace to be shown, and we'll let everybody know and all the supporters where it's going to be shown. So thank you very much. I'd like Patrick to come back up and thank everybody, and got a special presentation, sir.
Thank you, Lindsay. I just want to quickly go back to the video. Very impressive, don't you think? Can we give everyone a big hand? So thank you once again. It's Friday afternoon, and I know many of you are thinking of beating traffic to get back to your respective offices at homes. But this is very inspiring. You would agree with me. And like I said, I was very sincere when I said at the beginning, the best is yet to come. Because like one of my colleagues said, maybe it's promised too. So who knows what's to come. Let me also take this opportunity to thank you once again, Philip Crawley, both at a very personal level in terms of what you're doing, but also through the Globe and Mail as well. And I'm going to invite my colleagues, Stephen and Richard, to join me, and we want to make a presentation. Once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your support. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Perhaps we'll get a draw tomorrow. 1-1. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming, and that wraps it up. But don't go.